Welcome back, guys. So now we're gonna move to our painting part and let's go through all our supplies that we're gonna need for today. First thing you're going to need is paint. I'm gonna be using a student grade acrylic paint in primary colors only, which is yellow, red, blue, plus black and white. And I'll be mixing all those wonderful colors that you can see on the painting from those primaries. However, if you prefer to use pre-mixed paint, you're more than welcome to do that as well. And from pre-mixed paint, you might want to use a couple different shades of green, at least two, let's say dark green and medium green or light green. You might want to use some oranges, some browns, some purples. But most important, if you just want to make your life a little bit easier with, let's say, just one premix color, grab brown. Brown is always good to have just as a mixing base, and we can always use that to create all other colors that you can see on this painting. But also, if you're just using primaries like me today, that's more than enough because I'm going to be using all my colors, so I will show you how to mix all the colors that we're going to be using from just the primary colors. Now, another thing you're going to need is, of course, a paper towel. Always important to have, or reusable fabric cloth, water, and of course, brushes. I'm going to be using 3 different brushes, large, medium, and small. Because my canvas is so small, it's 8 by 10 inch, I'm not going to be using actually really large, medium, and small. I'm going to be using medium, large, medium, small, and small. So everything slightly on a smaller side, but generally something bigger, something medium, and something small, fine detailed brush with a pointy tip. So that's important. That's what you want to have. You want to have something medium according to the size of your canvas. Again, for me, this is a medium small. Something larger, for me, this is a medium large because my canvas is small. And small detailed brush with pointy tip regardless of the size of your canvas. So you're going to need this one. In my case, as you can see, these 2 brushes are square, but this is a personal preference. They don't have to be square. I personally like using square brushes, but pointy brushes will work just as well. And in certain cases, like for example for clouds, you might find that they will work even better. So I would say, again, don't be discouraged if you don't have square brushes, or if you do have square brushes, but also in addition to that, you have a nice rounded, let's say medium brush, something like this. Grab that too, because this would be perfect for your clouds. So just FYI, good to have all of that, or even something like this. So grab those two if you have them. And guys, remember, this is a video recording, so this video is designed for you to pause it. It's not designed for you to, keep up with my speed. It's designed for you to watch and pause as needed or rewatch sections of the video. So make sure you go at the pace that is comfortable for you. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to start working on my sky. So I'm going to work from the back towards the front because there's going to be a lot of layering and a lot of mixing. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add just the backdrop for my sky. And you're going to use the largest brush that you have. So for me, it's going to be this one. I'm going to dip it in the water. And the 2 colors that I'm going to use here is going to be a light blue and a medium warmer blue. So I'm going to start with the super light blue. I'm going to scoop some white on the side. Add just a tiny little smidge of blue. Make sure it's nice and super light. And then with this color, I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to start adding here. And if it gets a little bit onto your barn or onto your mountains, go right over them. Don't worry about that yet. We'll fix anything that needs to be fixed. So as long as you can somewhat still see your pencil lines, that's all we care for here. And also use a generous amount of paint. You don't have to use just like a smidge. I usually prefer on the sections like that where we're going to do some blending to use a good amount. And I might even take some white after this and just lighten up the very bottom here. And now I'm going to blend it into my top. So I'm going to go a little bit higher, the same color. And for the very top, I'm going to go slightly darker color. So to the same color I just used, which I don't have much of left, so let's make a bit more. So to the same color I just used, I'm going to add a bit more blue to make it slightly darker, and also just tiny bit of red to give it a little bit of a purple hint. We're not aiming for full-on purple, but we do want to give it a slight hint of purple. And with this color, I'm going to finish up my top here. And right away, I'm going to blend it into my light blue. So go right up to your light blue and then continue without refilling your brush, going down, and then when your brush gets contaminated with this light blue, instead of washing it, just continue going up into your darker color, and then continue doing that, up and down with the same horizontal side to side motion. Just you pick up a bit of that paint, spread it down, and you pick up a bit of lighter paint, spread it up, and so on. And if you feel like there's any other color that you would like to add in here, you can. Just make sure you do it all on wet. So it should be all done also in one step. Don't take any breaks just yet. Maybe I will even add a little bit of a warmer color. I'll add some pink here. You see, I made it a little pinker. This is not just pink, it's still like light purple, but because it was already blue in here, I just added a bit of white to make it lighter and a smidge of red to make it pinker. So this is another shade of purple. You see, it's like a light, almost like, oh, I don't even know what this would be called, but it's like a really beautiful light purple. So I'll add a couple smidges of that here maybe as well. Why not, right? It's a good color to have. Beautiful. And this is pretty much the base for my sky. And maybe I will add a little bit of white too on the bottom again, just to lighten it up a little bit. And by the way, everything is still wet, so I'm doing all of this on wet. Oh yeah, loving, loving, loving it. And as you can still see, I still see my lines somewhat. They're not super dark and visible, but I can still see them through my paint. And that's what matters. As long as you just can recognize what's where, that's the main goal here. We're not trying to keep anything dark. Now guys, something I want to mention right away before we get too far from here is the edges. It's totally up to you. Do you see right now I didn't do my edges? It's not my personal favorite to do edges as I go. I like the look of it. I love the look of it, but I'm not loving doing it. I prefer to do my edges in the end of the painting, but I know that a lot of people who don't love mixing and use primary colors prefer to do them as they go. And I would highly recommend it if you're one of those people. Maybe mixing is not your favorite, or maybe it just doesn't come easy to you to mix the colors and you're using primaries. Then as you go, because you already have those colors mixed, so wherever you get to the edge of the paint canvas of a certain color, just take this color and color the edge of the canvas with the same color. That way you don't have to color mix your, then you don't have to color match it later. You don't have to mix your paint again. And it's going to look super finished and complete and like you wrapped your image around your canvas once you're done. So again, it will take a little bit longer, but it will look good if you like the matched look in the end. If you like the look where it kind of waterfalls, your painting kind of waterfalls over the edges and it looks like you wrap the image around the canvas frame. So if you like that, just spend an extra minute doing it. It's only going to take a couple extra minutes for you to do. If you're not a fan of doing it as you go, or you don't care for the look, then you don't have to do that at all. We can always do that in the end once we're done and just go back and color match and mix the colors again. Or you can do what I usually do and just paint the edges black or any compatible color. So all those are good options. Just wanted to mention it up front in case you did want to use your paint on the edges as you go. All right, so now we have our sky. Before we can move to our clouds, it has to dry. So we're gonna let it dry. And as that's drying, we can move on to our mountains. And what are we gonna do? We're gonna start by doing the base of our mountain. And the base is gonna be exact same colors that we used here. So we're gonna do white, light blue-ish, something like that on the bottom. Then we're gonna do like a medium blue. And then we're gonna do the purple on top of it. So let me show you. I'm gonna start with taking some white on the side. And you can use any brush that you see that's appropriate. In my case, I'm gonna continue with the same brush for now. So I'm gonna make super, super light blue. And I'm gonna add it right onto the edge of my, sorry, not the edge, the bottom of my mountains. So you see, and go right over those tree lines because again, that was just an indication of direction. It wasn't the precise tree line. So you see, I added light blue. Then I'm gonna go, I'll make a bit more of this color. Back to this paint, and I'm gonna add a bit more blue to make a slightly darker color. You see, it's more like a medium light now. And with this, I'm gonna continue going up. I'm gonna do my first mountain. You see, all the way to the top. Just colored it with this slightly darker blue. And now I'm gonna take a little bit of it and I'm gonna go on to my second mountain here behind. I'll color that one too. Great. Now, I'm gonna move to my purple. So here's where you can switch to a slightly smaller brush or you can continue using the same brush, whatever works. I'm gonna continue using the same brush. And on the same spot, I'm gonna make more of a purple color now. Using the same ingredients, so again, I'm gonna start with white. I'll scoop some white. Then I'm gonna add a little bit of blue to make, I would say like a medium light blue again. And then I'm gonna add red to it. And you see it turns more purple. And I would say about medium to medium light purple. So you don't wanna go too dark with your purple. I'd say don't go past medium for sure, but you can even go a bit lighter than that. You can go like a medium light purple. And with this, I'm gonna start using brush strokey technique at this point. So instead of just, brushing it like this, I'm gonna add more of a brush strokes. And they do overlap, right? They're not like a separate brush stroke. So you add a couple of brush strokes, you make the overlap. It's just instead of doing it with one straight line, you do it in a brush stroke motion. And I'm gonna dab off my brush on a paper towel. Empty it, so you see I have almost next to no paint left. And I'm just gonna slightly blend them. And I'll refill and do a little bit more second mountain here. Then I'm gonna start darkening up my purple. So again, to the same color, I'm just gonna add a bit more red. And you see it got slightly darker. And then I'm gonna go next layer here, but I'm gonna add less of it. So again, I start with the very top. You see I don't go as low down with this. And then on my second mountain. If you need to blend anything, you can do that as well. You can wash off your brush, dab it off on a paper towel, and just go ahead and with a clean, slightly wet brush, just to blend certain areas. In my case, I don't need that. I'm happy with the look of my mountain. As you can see, there's going to be orange there, but that would be a later thing because we have to wait for our blue and purple to dry first before we can move to any orange or any similar color. So yeah, basically this is what we need to do. And because we're doing everything from the video, we have the ability to just pause it and wait. If we were in rush, I would probably, and it wasn't from the video, but it was a live event, I'd probably move on the bottom and continue working on the areas that we can work on. But because we are doing it from the video, so we're not really limited on time, I think the best way to do it is actually to pause and to give it some time to rest and wait until our sky or mountains dry, draw clouds and finish our mountains, and only then move on to the further elements. So that's what we're gonna do. I'm gonna pause this video recording. I'm gonna give my painting a couple minutes. My paint truly dries really, really fast. It wouldn't take more than 5 minutes. So I'll give it maybe this 5 minutes or even less to dry. And then I will resume this recording and we'll show you how to do a beautiful clouds here and those nice pastel-y orangey tones on our mountains. And then only once our sky is fully done, we're going to move further down here. So I suggest you guys do the same. You can pause here and let your painting dry and take a nice little break. Or if you paint slower than me and your paint is already super dry, you can just go right ahead and continue painting. Alright guys, my painting is pretty dry except two little dots right here. So I'm going to move on to my clouds. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to mix my color for my clouds. And that's where I would say you're welcome to do them with either medium large or medium small or combination of those two brushes. In my case, I have them square. Or you might actually find it easier to do them in rounded brushes. So I would probably say if you have rounded brushes, I would recommend it. If not, square is just fine. So let's start by mixing our color for our clouds. So I'm going to use square for now. It's going to be like a very pastel-y light peach color. So I'm going to start with the white. I'm going to scoop some white on the side. I'm going to add just a little bit of yellow to make light yellow. And just a little bit of red. So essentially I'm making like a light orange. I think this would be a perfect color, but again, let's see. You just never know. Sometimes it looks one way on your palette and then when you put it, it looks totally different and you have to adjust it. And sometimes it's just right. So I'm going to add clouds. You can have as many as you want. Position them however you want. In my case, they're all going to be slightly on an angle. So do you remember the angle of the brush strokes that I went with when coloring my sky? So that's pretty much going to be the angle of my clouds. They're not going to be fully horizontal. They're going to be angled, somewhat like this. And the important thing about clouds, they're like croissants in a way, but with a much pointier tips. So they have this fluffier middle and then they get thinner, 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 thinner on the ends, and then come to a point. They have those pointy tips. It's like if croissant was made out of rubber and you were stretching the corners of a croissant. This is the best analogy that I can give you, especially knowing the color of these clouds. So let's start from maybe something here. Oh yeah, that's a really good color. So you can do this in a brush stroke. So do you see what I'm doing right now? I'm building my stretched croissant out of very light and fluffy dry brush on brush strokes. For this, you need to be really good or comfortable at a dry brushing technique. If that's not your favorite technique, what you could do, you can do a dabbing instead. You can just dab it up, still dry brushing though. You only want to use a little bit of paint on your brush. You don't want to use too much paint. And try not to have the edge of your cloud solid. You want to have quite a fluffy edge, which means use as little paint as possible. Or option number 3, you actually just rub it. And if you're using your brush square, you're going to be using it flat. Do you see how I'm using it flat to the canvas? So you can rub it. That way it's going to be super, super light. But again, make sure you only use a little bit of paint. Now, what are you going to do if you're not using square brush and if you're using pointy brush? So with a pointy brush, it's actually much easier because you're just going to rub it as well. But it's just easier. That's the difference. Pretty much. Let me show you. So it's our first cloud, right? Second one's going to be right here. See? I just lightly brush it on. My 2 clouds, I'm going to add third one somewhere right here. And this is how little bit of paint I have on my brush. Notice, I'm just like, if I push on my brush a little hard, again, it sticks. But when I do it light, to scrape the surface of my canvas, this is how much paint I'm using. No blobs of paint. Very little. That's the goal. That's how you get fluffy, fluffy clouds. Add a bigger one right here. Again, your position can be completely different from mine. See, fluffy edge, no solid edge. Tiniest one right here. Alright, I'll make this one a little bit longer here. Great. I'm gonna add 2 here. one smaller one overlapping it underneath, right here. And if you guys doing your edges, make sure you bring them onto your edges as well, so don't avoid your edges. And one fairly big one right here. I'm gonna add a small one on the very top. So that's pretty much it for me for my clouds. And now with a little bit of the same paint, and you can use, again, either medium or large, or medium large, or medium small, somewhere around there, brush, and it can be square or pointed, doesn't matter at all. And I'm gonna just dry brush a little bit of this paint on the top left edge of this mountain here, and then on the top left edge of this mountain here too, just a little bit. Now we're gonna continue working on our clouds, and we're gonna add darker color and lighter color. So I'm gonna start with a darker color. And I'm gonna mix it, of course. So choose the same color if you still have it. You're gonna add more of the same exact ingredients. Just this time, if you still have a lot of paint, you don't need to add white. You're just gonna add red and yellow. So basically make it more saturated orangey / coral color. If you don't have white, like in my case, I actually don't even have paint left here. So I'm gonna start with white again. Just this time I'm gonna use more of my actual colors to make it a little more saturated. Let's try this and see. It looks a little pinkish, but I think it may work. It's a beautiful color. I think I'm gonna make it a little more orangey by adding a touch more yellow. Oh yeah, it's a good color. And again, you're gonna dry brush it on, so you don't need too much paint on your brush. And you're not gonna dry brush it on over the entire thing. I'm only dry brushing it on over the lower part of it. So very lightly, using just a touch of paint on your brush. It's like if you've ever applied makeup and you applied blush, or eyeshadow, this is basically the same kind of technique. You don't want to have, when you apply blush, you don't want to have a circle over your cheek, right? You don't apply it in shape, you apply it lightly. Same with eyeshadow, especially if you do multicolor eyeshadow, you apply it lightly. So this is the same idea. You apply it very, very lightly, using just a touch of paint on your brush, the same way it is. You see, just a little bit. And if you accidentally apply too much, like a blob, just grab a finger and you can smudge it, you can rub it, you can dab it, however you want to smudge it. And again, if you're doing your edges, don't forget to bring this over your edges as well. If you're not doing your edges, just don't worry about it. It's totally fine. Alright, so here's my second layer. This color I'm not going to add to my mountains, by the way. No, this color. And I'm going to add even darker color. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make just a touch of darker color. So to this I'm going to add even a bit of more red and a bit more yellow. You see? And with this, I'm just going to add a little bit of that on a certain cloud. So I'm not going to add it everywhere, the whole thing. So I'm going to choose a couple spots and I'm just going to add a little bit of that there. So for example, right here, just going to add a little bit of it, the darkest color. I'm going to touch right here. Do a touch right here. Basically, you can just choose a couple spots. Just don't do it everywhere onto everything because it's not necessary. Do a touch on this one, just a little touch, and maybe a touch on this guy right here. Touch on this side too. See, very little. And then we're going to move to a lighter version. So I'm going to wash my brush. And the same color scheme, just going to add more white to it to make a lighting version. Maybe a little bit more yellow because that looked a little too pinky. So the same ingredients, just make sure it doesn't look pink. Have that light orangey, peachy undertone. So let's try this one and see how it goes. And this I'm going to add on all the upper parts. This is good, but not light enough. So I'm just going to add a bit more white. And again, dab it off on a paper towel so you don't have too much paint there. And you can go ahead. Oh, this is pretty good, but I need a bit more white. Oh yeah, beautiful. Just very lightly highlight the tip of your clouds. I'll switch actually here to a smaller brush. This brush seems to be a little too big. Oops. So again, if you went with pointy brushes, go with pointy brushes. If you went with square brushes, go with square brushes. If you went, let's say, with a base for a square, probably go with highlight square too, just to keep the same texture and the same movement, but really it doesn't matter. If you mix and match, it's going to be slightly different textures and looks, but it's not a bad thing necessarily. However, I personally prefer to keep the same feel. So if I go usually with square for the bottom of the cloud, I will continue going with square for the tip of the cloud too. If I go with a rounded for the bottom, I'll go with a rounded for the top. So again, very, very lightly. Alright, and then I'm going to add a little bit of this light color onto our mountain edge as well. So I'm going to brush it down right here just a little bit. Brush it down right here just a little bit. Then I'm going to wash with my brush and I'm going to do straight white actually. And if you want to go further with your clouds, you can even add straight white to your clouds, or you can just do it on the mountains. Again, very, very little. So see if you want to do clouds, you have to be like a little smidge. Nice little silver lining on the upper part. And then I'll add just a little bit onto the mountains. And you can do this with a small brush too. I'm doing with a medium just because you see my medium can still give me finest lines if it needed to. But small would probably be more ideal brush for this. Just gonna add a little bit of it on the side of our mountains. Well, then this is pretty much what it looks like right now. And after that, we're going to move on to our trees. So do you remember those trees, the goddess? But guys, before you move on to trees, I would actually recommend that you finalize the look of your clouds and your skyline mountains. If you feel like there's something else that can be or should be added to either, do it now before we move to any other element of this painting, because you're not going to really be able to work more on your clouds and your mountains once we add the trees, because they do overlap both clouds and a mountain. So that's why it's best to get those out of the way and done and bring them to your liking before moving on to the trees. But once you have them, great, we can move on to our trees. So if you need to, feel free to pause it and just work on your upper area, the upper section of the painting for longer. But whenever you have it, we're going to move to trees. And I'm going to be using medium, small squares. So this one, that's my favorite brush for the trees. But honestly, any medium to small brush is good. I would definitely say avoid larger brushes here unless your canvas is just massive, in which case you can. But for the smaller or medium-sized canvas, medium to small is best. And we're going to make a color for it, and it's going to be a dark green color. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to start with yellow. I'll scoop some yellow on the side. This all is just wet, so I'm going to blend on those areas, but they're completely wet. Sorry, they're completely dry, so my paint, these purples are not going to mix into green. Just so you know, I'm not mixing intentionally on a purple spot. So I'm going to start by mixing yellow and blue about equal parts. And you see it already gives me a nice dark green. But for this particular painting, I want a specific shade of green. I don't want just a dark green, because this dark green is dark, but it's also vibrant. And that's not what I want. I want a dim, almost like a burned undertone dark green. So to my dark green, I'm going to add a little bit of red. And what that will do, it's going to give it that, it's going to kill the vibrancy basically of this dark green. Now do you see with, this is without red, this is with red. It's much swampier, and this is what I want. I want the swampiness of the color and darkness. I want to lose this vibrancy. So by adding just a little bit of red, you're losing the vibrancy. If you have this color pre-mixed, you're welcome to use it too. We're just looking for dark swampy green. That's pretty much what we're looking for here. And then I'm going to be ready to move on my trees. And what I'm going to do, and what I always do with the trees, is I start by positioning my tree trunks first. And if you have a good medium small square brush, you can use the top edge of the brush like this to position your tree trunks. If not, then you're going to need to use small brush. So I'm going to position from the left to the right just because I'm right-handed and it's easier to go this way. If you're left-handed, you might find it easier to go this way, just so you don't accidentally put your hand on one of those fresh tree trunks. So I'm going to put the taller one somewhere right here, and then a slightly shorter one, and shorter, and a short one. Then from short to tall here, basically just add, not every single one of them has to be next one. You know, there could be a variety of some of them taller, some of them shorter. It's just the overall needs to have this curve on them getting taller and taller. Not every single one has to be a bit taller than a previous one. It's good to have a bit of mix and match kind of thing, as long as overall the general trend is for them to get taller. Or if you're all about perfection and it bothers you that they're kind of mix and match, then you can do every single one slightly taller than a previous one. All right, and now I'm going to turn them into trees. And how I'm going to do it, I'm just going to dab. So if you're using a square brush, you're just going to dab with the top edge of your brush. And you're going to do small dabs on top. And as you go lower, you're going to do larger dabs or brush strokes, so like this. And all of them are going to be horizontal. See? If you're using a pointy tip brush, such as small brush or medium small brush, then instead of dabs, you can only do brush strokes. But it's the same thing. You start with the top, do smaller ones, and as you go lower, you can make them wider, wider, longer, longer, and longer. And then you fill up the entire thing like this. The goal with all your trees is to be nice and sort of like a pointy triangles. See, I'm not going all the way to the bottom, and the only reason why, because I'm gonna solid fill the bottom. So I'm going until they all start merging into one another, and then I just stop because the rest, there's no point to continue dabbing because they're just gonna need to be solid filled anyway. Okay, so the rest, I'm just gonna solid fill the rest. Can continue doing the same thing that we were doing on top, but I find that it's easier and faster to just solid fill it, and you're not gonna see the difference in the end. All the way until that original line where we started. But also I'm gonna make sure that this line is not just straight. I'm just gonna flick down from it to start off our grass with a nice texture. Great. And let's go on this side. The same thing, I'll fill the bottom and then I will texture it down. Flick it down like this. Awesome. And again, if you guys are doing your edges, then bring your trees right to the edges. And I will actually add second color there too. I'm gonna add second color that's gonna be like the same color but just even darker. So it's gonna have a smidge of black in it as well. You can do it right away. You can wait until this is dry. I personally kind of want to wait until this is dry because it's still a little too wet. So if I try to add another color here, it's likely not even gonna stick. So I would prefer to wait until it's a little bit drier. So what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna end this segment of the video because it's been already almost an hour, which is a long time. And I suggest that you take a break, and I myself will take a break too, because it's always good to take a breaks in between, especially at around an hour mark, then 2 hour mark. So I like to take breaks hourly personally. Um, Even half an hour is good to take breaks. I don't recommend going more than an hour in one sitting without a break at all. So I think it's a good time to take a break and let all this dry, and then we'll add a second layer once it dries. So I'm gonna end this segment of the video, and then I'll see you in the next segment, and we'll move on to adding a second layer here. I'll see you guys there.